All right. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see all of you after lunch. I hope you will not fall asleep with your bellies being full. And I'm here today. My name is Mateusz. Surname is pretty difficult to pronounce, but I'm going to repeat it only once if one of you maybe would be interested. So it's Wrzeszcz. It's so difficult because I'm coming from Poland, but don't worry about it. You can call me Matt. I guess that's easier. And I'm here today to talk to you about mastering ASO testing, specifically A/B testing. But I want this session to be slightly different than any other speech about A/B testing that you can find easily in the internet, because I know there's a ton of them. And I also know that you are here to hear some of the more advanced techniques, tactics, which you can use in your daily job. And over the past few years, I gather like a huge backlog of tactics, findings, and tricks that I figured out over the past few years working at Feature and then right now at Klarna. And I'm just here to show it all to you. So without further ado, let's begin. And as I said at the beginning, I will try today to provide you answers to non-obvious questions. And some of them may seem contrary to you, but I put them here just to bring your attention and to show what you expect from this presentation. First of all, you will possibly be able to answer why testing only one change at a time won't get you far, why you shouldn't test everything, why not everyone can run sensible A/B tests and there is completely nothing wrong about it, why you can apply an experiment which is not a clear win, and why you shouldn't stop your test as soon as Google points a winner. If you take a look at it, maybe some of them, as I said, seem contrary, but I believe you will be completely able to understand what I mean by the end of my speech. Very briefly, who am I? A marketing manager at Klarna, ex-ASO consultant at Feature, working in the creative squad with Anton, who was also presenting today. We've been focusing a lot of testing and creatives. And last, maybe the chances are low, but maybe you know me from my A/B testing articles that I post on my Medium and on ASO Stack blog. Woo! And yeah, now let's begin let's go to the essence. And I want to clean up a bit the whole area of A/B testing. And I want to tell you today that not all A/B tests are created equal. Maybe it's completely obvious to you and sounds trivial, but it wasn't trivial to me back a few years ago. And I asked myself this question: why we have to bother with minimum sample size calculations when in performance marketing we also run A/B tests and no one talks about such things, right? All of us are doing A/B tests when we are running Facebook ads, whatever, and no one cares if you got your minimum sample size reached or not. So why do we have to bother with that when it comes to Play Store testing, for example? And what I want to introduce today is like a split into two types of A/B testing. So the first left-hand side testing, even though it's called, of course, A/B testing, it's not the same as the A/B testing as we all know it from storefronts. And let's take a look at the comparison. So if you take a look at left side, the traffic is split into halves. It provides observed difference in performance between variants in real time, and it tells which sample performs better or worse at the moment, right? But on the other side, the one that we work the most as ASO practitioners also is based on traffic split into halves. However, here's the main difference. It provides predicted future difference in variance performance in comparison to the default. It also tells you which sample is meant to perform better or worse if applied as a new default. But additionally, it tells you how confident you can be that your results are not caused by chance. And it helps make you more informed decisions, so you can understand the risks which are connected with applying a variant. And if you apply, for example, a false positive, you understand what you are risking here. And lastly, it lets us test on small samples, for example, 20%. But it all comes with some costs, right? We cannot actually treat both of these testing in the same way, because the right-hand side one is providing us with much more data, but also requires us to have much higher culture of work with it. And now to conclude it, the left one is based on real-time data, provides observed difference in performance, while the right-hand side is based on probabilistic methods used to estimate the future performance. And the Play Store is based on frequency statistics model, while App Store one is based on Bayesian statistics. And I'm not going to go into details right now. First of all, because I don't want to embarrass myself with my statistics knowledge. Secondly, because we don't have time for that. But I promise you that I will explain it later on, and I will also let you know in which moment you have to remember that these two are different, and you have to treat them in a slightly different way. OK, so now, once we already figured out what I'll be talking about to you today, let's start with preparing for A/B testing. And this is the step which is not unusual. You will see it over and over in every single speech about A/B testing, so I know I'm not going to surprise you here, but it really is the single most important step of testing. And very often it's missed, it's treated, with like not so much attention. But if you are familiar with CRO loop, which is developed by Feature, it also is their first step in the whole optimization process. And at Klarna, I developed our own testing loop, which is based on wider funnel testing experimentation process. And what I like specifically about this loop is that it stressed out how important it is to include research in your testing. It's not something which is just like one small minor step that you can forget about. Its importance is equal to the testing itself. And as you can see here, there are also some surrounding elements. I'm not really going to go through all of them, but I want to draw your attention to one thing. Testing is an iterative process which goes on and on, while research doesn't necessarily need to be, right? We got a lot of separate elements. All of them are providing some data, insights, and it's great to do it all, but you don't necessarily have to. And now I will also focus on two more things from this diagram. On the left-hand side, I want to draw your attention to heuristic assessment. If you are following Feature ASO stack blog, you might possibly see some of my articles about heuristic analysis cheat sheet. And it's like an analysis which is based on a very strong evidence which was brought over the past years of experimentation. Some of the tactics here are deriving from website optimization. Some of them are dedicated to ASO, but it's like a very handy tool, framework, which we can use to assess your screenshots, assess your short and long description, and based on that, come up with some initial ideas for your tests. On the left-hand side, we got the analogy to Maslow's pyramid of needs. It all starts with store guidelines, because we all need to fulfill them. Then you got the relevance and clarity of value proposition. Generally, value proposition is your most strongest bet that you should try to target if you are thinking about experiments backlogs. And then we got some other levels, such as personalization, trust and security, and stimulants. Afterwards, I'm pretty sure that the Feature team will share the slides with you, so you'll be able to make a copy for yourself and conduct the analysis for your own screenshots. Now, one more thing from the right side of the testing loop that I showed you, prioritization, which is very often problematic matter. And I know there are a bunch of different models which help you, at least in theory, clean up your ideas. But here I would like to give you some practical examples, which I'm just using in my daily job, and it's bringing me amazing results. So first of all, we are starting from qualitative insights that you already own. I like to treat testing as a quantitative way to validate qualitative insights, right? So once you already got the insights gathered through interviews, through user testing sessions, then later on, you take those insights, you hypothesize, and you try to validate them with a lot of data, with a lot of users in your A/B tests, right? You also got other channel discoveries, so you just have to talk to other teams at your company, such as paid, CRM, and so on. And of course, past experiments results inspire ideas. This is something very often missed. It's very important to lead backlog of your experiments. First of all, not to waste time on repeating the same experiments over and over. And secondly, to actually learn from what you did in the past. And only after you are sure that you have fulfilled all of those elements from the first element, I would suggest to to go one step further, right? And then we got ASO and conversion rate optimization best practices, heuristic analysis findings, and competitors-inspired ideas, right? For example, using Uptweak, you can track your competitors' screenshot changes and get inspired from them. And the last element is blue sky thinking, what ifs, and creative adjustments. And what I see very often when I work with different apps is that a lot of us actually start from the third point, right? We are starting to change the background color from green to yellow, or we are changing the font, or changing the creative elements, which sometimes are completely not being able to be noticed by visitors who simply visit our app, right? So it makes much more sense to start from qualitative insights. All right, applied ASO statistics crash course. Once again, a disclaimer, I'm very far away from being a scientificist or having a scientific mind, but it's not necessarily required for all of you to make a sensible testing. And I want to prove you that it's possible to make sensible testing. However, you need these foundations of statistics to run them in a thoughtful way. And to me, oh, amazing, that's one element that I forget to set the animation for. But the essence of understanding statistics for A/B testing starts from understanding MDE. MDE stands for minimum detectable effect. If you are familiar with any kind of sample size calculators, you definitely encountered MDE, and it's very tricky to understand it if you are new to statistics, to testing, anything connected to A/B testing in general. And what I did over the past few months, and I also published a few articles about it, is that I took a lot of MDE definitions, and I tried to find what's in them for ASO, for our needs. I tried to simplify them. And of course, if there's any statistician on the hall today, will definitely roast me and say that it's not a proper definition, but it's good enough for our needs. And I split that into two parts. The first one says that minimum detectable effect is the minimum relative difference in conversion rate between the default variant and the treatment we want to be able to reliably detect. Second one, that is used to specify the minimum expected improvement in tests below which the experiment is not worth running, thus making the potential positive impact too small to devote time, effort, or money to. And as long as the second part of definition makes complete sense when we are talking about more sophisticated tests, such as pharmacy tests, or when you are doing a huge redesign of your website and you need to include a lot of engineers and people working on it, you need to spend a lot of time, and time equals money, it would make a lot of sense. For us, ASO practitioners, even the smallest difference in conversion rate usually would be a huge win, right? Who from you would not like to increase your conversion by, let's say, 0.2%, right? Probably everyone would like to do it because we don't need to spend that much time on creating the variants. So that's why I would like to focus more today on the first definition, which treats more about the reliability part. And once we are speaking about minimum detectable effect, let's actually understand what detectable effect is. And for us, I simplified that to one thing. In ASO testing, your design's copy variants define your detectable effect. So the degree to which you differentiate your variants are your effect. If it's still not clear to you, I would suggest to ask yourself that question. How bold should I get with screenshots design copy changes to reach statistical validity within an acceptable period of time? Of course, all of us can change even the smallest difference in screenshots, like adding one dot somewhere on the 10th screenshot, but we would need probably like hundreds of years for that, right? And we don't really want to waste our time and resources for such an unmeaningful change. And A/B testing is all about finding sweet spot between your conversion rate, MDE, so minimum detectable effect, and confidence level. Here is like a very handy chart which shows the relation of your traffic to the MDE. And on the left side, you got 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. But this is just the equivalent of the amount of traffic which gets into your app. So as you can see, after the first week, or let's say after first 1,000 of visitors, you are only able to detect the relative difference of 6%. And if you work with optimizing screenshots, you know that 6% is probably impossible to be able to achieve if you are a well-established app, right? Like 6% for apps such as Klarna, if I manage to bring such a huge change in one screenshot experiment, I would probably be promoted to vice president, I hope, because I will bring millions of dollars of revenue to Klarna only from this one experiment, right? So it's very difficult. It's much more possible if you are like a early stage startup, you are just starting with your optimizations, but it's super difficult to achieve if you are a well-established app. And then you see with every week, as the more visitors are coming into your experiment, you are able to detect smaller difference, right? So after 4 weeks, you're able to detect 3% relative difference, which is already pretty fine. And that's like an average slight redesign of screenshot test. That's what we can achieve. And on the right-hand side, it's like a nice analogy to fishing nets. And this graphic is taken from Analytics Toolkit. It speaks actually about statistical power. And I'm not introducing here the definition of statistical power, but just keep in mind that that's the function of your confidence level and sample size, right? So it's pretty straightforward. And what it says, that the low power net, the low power experiment can only catch the big effects, right? So the effects which are having high MDE, so let's say 6%, right? Because you don't have enough users in your traffic, in your experiment, and you only have to bet for the biggest changes. While if you got more visitors in your experiment or lower confidence level, but I don't recommend to lower your confidence level, then you can catch much more changes, medium or even some small ones, right? But of course, you can never catch all of them because we would need to run the test for prohibitively long period of time. And now some real-life examples. If it's still not entirely clear to you, I'm giving you some real-life examples to show how it looks in practice. And the experiments that I find being bold, being highly diversified. The first one is coming from Coinbase. And second one is Spotify. And as you all know, probably both these apps are super popular. They can get like hundreds of thousands of installers every day, every week. And they are still going for such highly differentiated experiments when they are running their tests. You can see everything changes here, from captions, through fonts, through focus on features, through colors, aesthetics. They simply completely redesign their tests, even though they're pretty popular apps, right? So they can really allow themselves to do more detailed testing. But even they are doing that. And my estimation here, of course, is just like a guess, is that the estimated MDE that they could try to target here would be around 3 to 4%. And now the opposite side, so the reserve experiments that I don't necessarily recommend you to do unless you want, to validate some internal assumption that you get and someone just tells you to run such experiment. The first one is coming from HBO Max. The second one is from Amazon Music. I hope we don't get anyone here on the audience from those two apps. But if so, maybe the person will be able to explain why they did so. As you can see, it's pretty difficult to actually to see what was changed here, especially in the second row. What they did is that they only added 90 millions instead of millions of songs. And now ask yourself, would that actually work for your visitors who enter your product page? Would that be significant change enough to impact their behavior? My bet would be that it wasn't. The second one is simply changing the screenshot order, and as long as it would make total sense on App Store, on Play Store, where anyone who enters your product page still sees 3.5, 4 screens depending on the resolution of their device, it's not really gonna make a tremendous change. Plus, the illegible captions are yet another element that might not help here. And my guess here would be that the estimated MDE would be even below 1%. So it would probably take a lot of time for both of these apps, especially that they are not from the top ranks, to get enough data to have statistically significant and valid experiment. And yeah, there are sample size calculators which you should use. They are there to help you. And once you already got a very general understanding of MDE, as I hope, you can start using them and leveraging to the fullest. On the left-hand side, you got probably the most popular A/B sample size calculator out there made by Evan Miller. It's probably older than I am, or at least it looks like it's older. But the most important element that you can see here is minimum detectable effect, because everything else is easy to cope with, like baseline conversion rate, statistical power, significance level. It's all easy. If you don't know how to feel it, just take a look at some of the articles that I publish on my Medium, and I explain it all over there. But how they can actually help you. So why am I even talking about that? Once Google already gives us something like a sample size calculator, which is built in since late June last year into their testing environment. So this sample size calculator can help you understand how to set up the experiments, which parameters to choose, how to choose the most optimal setup. Furthermore, you can understand your market capacity and required degree of changes to design better backlogs. And this one is very important, and I will soon expand on that a lot, because this is probably the most important take from this prezo. And last but not least, help to group your markets into tiers, groups, and based on traffic volume and conversion rate, organize your experiments roadmaps. And what I mean here by grouping the markets into tiers, groups based on traffic or conversion rates. So what I did at Klarna is I splitted all of our traffic that we got into three main parts. The first one is low traffic markets, second moderate, and the third high. While on the other side, I also took a look at low, moderate, and high conversion rate. Because as you know before, statistical power is the relation of statistical significance to the sample size. So in low traffic markets, I'm not doing A/B testing at all, because it will take me a lot of time, a lot of resources, and it's just not worth it to run A/B tests in such markets. In moderate traffic markets, I do go with slightly lower confidence level to get the results quicker, but I always target only the highest MDE. It means that I'm making super bold changes in those moderate traffic markets. Only in moderate with high conversion rate, I allow myself to go for more reserved changes. And lastly, in high traffic markets, I go all in. We got a lot of traffic over there, and I can even check the smallest possible difference in screenshots, because I know I will have enough traffic to be able to reach the statistical significance and validity. If it's not telling you much, here is the analogy to degree of changes to your design, right? So as you can see, in moderate, I'm making the boldest. In high traffic, I'm making the smallest changes, because that's what I'm allowed to do with my traffic and my sample size. And you can make your life easier with this custom-made sample size calculator that I did for Play Store experiments. Great thing about this is that you can simply export CSV from your Play Store experiments console, put it into the second tab, and it will automatically populate all of your data, showing you how much time you need to gather enough visitors into your experiment. And again, here's the link. Once you get the slides, you will be able to make yourself a copy. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you a question, but I already revealed that. So I wanted to ask you, how many of you make bold, diversified experiments? Thomas is making bold experiments. Example, what I mean by bold, that you're completely redesigning your design set, your screenshot set, you are completely focusing on different features and so on. Can you raise your hands? All right, let's say like 40% of the audience. And now my suggestion, as you could already see it, is don't be afraid to go bold. And why I'm saying that, if you have cautiously listened to my speech, it's obvious that it's much easier to get statistically valid tests if you go bold, if you do drastic changes to your design. Here is a handy graphic that I found on LinkedIn from Radek Sienkiewicz, and he's comparing trivial testing to radical A/B testing. As you can see here, you got less wins with radical A/B testing, but they are of much higher value. And I'm not telling you right now that you should completely move out from testing a single, one change at a time. However, I'm also not a big supporter of that. But you should at least try to put it into your backlogs once per quarter to have like a highly differentiated, radical redesign of your set and see what it brings you. Make sure you get to users' minds with your changes. This one is very important, and it's simply about making sure that users actually are able to notice the change that you introduce to your screenshots, right? Think in your head when you design those variants, if I show them to real people in real life, would they be able to notice the difference in 3 seconds? If the answer is no, it probably means that your difference is not strong enough. Another one, prioritize first impression frame in your backlog. What I mean by that is that if you want to make sure that you get enough visibility to the changes that you made, you should simply prioritize first 4 screenshots on Play Store, first 3 or first and second of the half screenshot on product page optimization on App Store. Then this could be a bit surprising to some of you, but I'm always trying to convince people not to test only one change at a time, but one hypothesis. And what I mean by that is that it's definitely not going to hurt you if you are changing 3 screenshots or 4 screenshots at once instead of just one, as long as it's all in line with the hypothesis that you are trying to validate. So if you are a TripAdvisor and you want to validate that going to Brazil is better than going to Portugal, you can completely change 3 screenshots, 4 screenshots, and make a lot of changes, but make sure that all of those changes are in line with that hypothesis that you are trying to validate. It's completely fine, it works, and I can promise you, you're not gonna regret that. And don't test everything. This is something repeated like a cliche over and over on every single speech about A/B testing. Everyone's saying, you should test everything, just go for it. No, you should not test everything. You should only test things which make sense, which are noticeable to your users, and which, in the best case scenario, are based on your qualitative insights. And using one creative variant in multiple markets is a potential mistake. That's what I was talking about before when I was showing you the market segmentation, that grouping that I did. Simply, if you are using the same variant in, let's say, US, which is your biggest market, and in Czech Republic, which is your smallest market, and you expect the tool to deliver statistically valid results within the same period of time, of course, you're making a huge mistake. And now let's sum up before we move further. Just a quick conclusion. Rather than trying to understand how a singular design element can impact your conversion rate, base your testing roadmaps on validating hypotheses built on solid qualitative insights. Of course, you can still go for singular design elements, even smaller, but make sure that you get enough traffic to do so. If you don't have any qualitative insights yet, try leveraging what other teams in your organization have learned from areas like performance marketing, CRM. Alternatively, you can use the heuristic analysis that I showed you to come up with some initial ideas. If you haven't been aware so far that reserve, granular, and risk-averse testing requires enormous volumes of visitors, you really should reevaluate your experiments backlog. And let me now take a small break. Fantastic. The water never tasted so good as today. Now, let's go to monitoring tests and making decisions. A question to the audience. You see such result in your Play Store experiment, and it's not visible here, but please imagine that Play Console says that variant B performs better than current listing. And as you can see here, the test lasted for more than 7 days. It gathered the biggest amount of installers when it comes to both current and scaled. And also the performance bar is fully green, right? So it sparks from +7% to +23%. If you take a look also at the chart, it's leading all the time during the experiment period. So it looks like probably all the factors are saying we should apply it, right? So right now, please raise your hand. Who would apply a such experiment? Okay, like 20% of people, maybe 15%. And now I would like to show you one more slide. This is the same experiment that I relaunched 1 week after, but I left for 4 weeks more. And now Google is no longer saying that we should apply variant B. It's actually saying that we are getting what I call negative tie, right? That actually the variant B is the worst performing one from others. And why something like that happened? It happened simply because we gather more traffic into our tests. And now you can ask, so why Google is suggesting to apply variant B, and then they change their mind. Like, are they trying to fool us? Of course not. One thing that you have to remember about A/B testing that is super tricky is that statistical significance on which every single A/B testing tool bases, no matter if you are using third-party testing tool or Play Store, does not equal statistical validity. These are two completely different things. And what I mean by that, take a look at that chart. You can see here the statistical significance, which is set to 95%, and visitors that gets into your experiment over time. Every time the line goes below the 95% bar, it's the moment when Google can suggest you to apply a variant, when it sees that it performs better at the moment. But it's your responsibility as a marketer to check if you have already reached the sample size required to be able to detect the changes that you are trying to detect. So if Google is saying after 5 days that you should apply the variant B, first thing you do, you calculate your sample size. Actually, you should that even before. And then only after you make a decision whether you want to apply your experiments or not. Here is just like another confirmation of why you should do that if you have never heard of that and you think that I'm saying some bullshits. A guy called Mats Einersen launched 1,000 control experiments where it was known that there is no difference between the variants in the experiments. So simply he launched 1,000 AA experiments, one at 95% confidence level and second one at 90% confidence level. What he got was that 771 AA, the same experiments, reached significance at some point, and 531 reached significance with 95% significance level at some point. What that tells us, your experiment result means nothing if you haven't checked your sample size beforehand. Don't stop your test as soon as Google points the winner. Always check the sample size first, unless you don't care about the validity of your experiments. Cool, and now that's the final part of my speech, which is dedicated to Thomas Petit. As I was telling him yesterday that this one may intrigue him. And this may intrigue also a lot of you, because I know that as many marketers are here, all of us can have different take on interpreting performance bars. And I also got intrigued by that, of course, a few years ago. And yeah, I also wanted to know what you are thinking about it. So I asked ASO practitioners on ASO Slack channel if they apply ties. And the answer was that nearly 1/3 of them don't apply ties, no matter how they look like. And for reference, this is what I consider a tie, right? So the performance bar sparks from the red side to the green. It may look like that, it may look a bit worse, but that's what I consider a tie. And another thing that I consider and that I claim is that such approach, in most cases, can drastically limit your optimization opportunities. And now I'm gonna try to explain you why I think in this way. First of all, in order to make sure that we fully leverage what Play Store provides us, or any other testing tool that works in a similar way, is we have to understand confidence intervals. And performance bars are simply confidence intervals. That's what they are based on. And there's one thing which all of these graphics got in common. They simply all present the same thing. They present confidence interval. With the only difference that the confidence intervals that we are the most used to on the right-hand side from Play Store, they look flat, right? So we just look at it and we don't see anything else than numbers. But in reality, they are based on normal distribution. This is like a statistical term, but all what you need to remember is that normal distribution can be visualized with a bell-shaped curve, so the one that you see in the center of the screen. And what it stands for distribution of sample means around population mean. If that tells you nothing, I'm gonna tell you that it's just a distribution of installs in your variant. So now, what we can learn from that discovery? Simply that if you take a look at your lower band and your higher band, and you will try to find an average, the average score would be your most trusted estimated impact that you can get if you decide to apply a such variant. And in this case, in case of this specific positive tie, we can expect a change which will be around 3%. However, this is the most trusted, not most likely, as the Google says in their documentation. If you take a look at the documentation of performance bars, they will say that if you got a score between 5 and 15%, your most likely score will be 10%. That's bullshit, it's not true. Your likelihood is the same no matter where you look at the performance bar, because the likelihood is specified by confidence level. So if you decide to make an experiment with 95% confidence interval, there's the same chance that the results will be within this range at -2, -1, 0, or +7.9. The chance is the same. However, there is much more evidence behind believing that your true value, the one that you are trying to achieve, is at the center, because as you can see in the middle graphic, there is much more evidence behind it at the center of it. So that's like a clever way to sometimes, if you are that open to risk, to apply some of the ties. And what I did additionally, I prepared like a super simple percentile calculator that you can again copy for yourself, and you can adjust it to your needs. I adjust it to mine, which means that I can choose if my risk appetite is low, moderate, or high. And depending on that, it will suggest me either to apply the variant of not, simply calculating the percentile, right? So the moderate means that 75% of this bar that is visible is in green, and that's what this calculator is checking. So as you can see here, I wouldn't apply the left-hand side one, but I would apply the right-hand side because I just see that it's strong enough for my needs, and it's gonna bring me what I'm expecting. And one additional side note, I can tell you that I'm working with some apps for like a year or even longer. And I got one case in which an app has never brought me a fully positive result, and I'm still managing to increase the conversion rate over and over. And if you compare last year to this year, you will see like a complete change and conversion rate increasing month over month, even though I only got ties. And now, as I'm talking almost all the time about Play Store, but this is also not without reason, as I know all of you treat Play Store testing environment as a priority because of all of the drawbacks that Apple provides us with their testing tool. I also want to touch very shortly how to make a PPO more useful. So during some of the periods that I used to work with apps, we managed to have something which was called like a release freeze, which finally enabled me to test the PPO tool. And I used that time of 3 weeks that we have no release, because otherwise, of course, it would be interrupted, to make a test on iOS. And these are the results that I get from super diversified set. Like one was about one thing, second one was about something completely different. I look at that and I said, all right, well, so I'm not actually missing a lot, right, from not testing and not using that tool. But it's not actually that useless. What I did is I took the impressions and I multiplied them by conversion rate, and I also got the downloads, right? And once you got impression and downloads, you can actually start using third-party calculators. But remember what I mentioned at the very beginning. Play Store is using frequency statistics, while PPO uses Bayesian statistics. So we cannot use frequency calculators for Bayesian statistic tool. That's why there is a separate tool which is called abtestguide.com/Bayesian. And once you put your data in it, it will produce much better looking, much more informative results. And as I did before on Play Store, I stick to 75th percentile of my bar being green. Here you can also choose that the chance of being best should be above, let's say, 75% or 80%, right? In this case, it tells us much more and is much more informative than just saying that the improvement is 0.13% and they are 1% confident about that. Like, that tells me nothing, right? So feel free to use those third-party testing tools, but remember that that needs to be for Bayesian statistics. And also remember, if you got very strict release schedule and you are making releases on and on, that there's one thing that you can do even if you are having releases every week. You can simply test the reorder of your screens, because that doesn't have to go through the review process. And at Klarna, we got a weekly review process, and I'm leveraging that idea to test still using PPO, because I don't have to wait for the review. So soon after the release is published, I just hit start the test, and I got full 7 days, which in the biggest market is enough for me to reach the statistical validity and significance. But A/B testing alone is not enough. That's probably the last slide, so if some of you are already bored, I'm not gonna stay here for long. Remember that you always should cross-check the result no matter what tool you are using, whether that's native, whether that's third-party tool. You should really always, especially if you care about the market that you are doing that in, cross-check the result. The first idea is to do the ABB test, about which Simon from Uptweak wrote an excellent article, so feel free to read it on their blog. Second one is to do something which is called backward testing, which means that we are simply applying the variant, and then our old default is the new treatment, right? And we are seeing whether the results will be the same or opposite, whether they will basically confirm what we have discovered. And the last one is sequential analysis, right? Known as before and after testing. Just make sure that you cover for seasonality and you are not having your data affected by some external events. And the final summary, don't add your test as soon as Google gives you recommendation, guys. Always calculate your minimum sample size per each market and try to reach it with your experiments. Treat any A/B test result as a directional cue rather than oracle, and always validate your results with another method. Remember that no matter how sophisticated your approach will be from the statistical point of view, your experiments are only as good as the research you did beforehand. A good way to think about A/B testing, what I mentioned already, is that it's a quantitative way to validate qualitative insights, difficult word, gathered before in your organization. This helps exclude ideas with low potential to impact the conversion rate, such as let's change the color of the button at the 8th screen. Generally, it's easier to get statistically valid results from experiments with highly differentiated variants. So unless you got a ton of traffic or you don't care about statistical validity, just go bold. And this is pretty much everything what I prepared for you. Thank you very much.